So excited to have the third annual Belmont Celtic Fest. When we started this 2 years ago, we didn't know if it would be something that would take off, but it really has. And the weather's cooperating this year, even though we did have to move the stage up where gravel is. But we're going to have a wonderful 2-day event here. And thank you all for being here today. We want you to be sure and take time to walk around the Belmont Mansion that was built circa 1828. It's self-guided today and will be tomorrow as well. Right now, we're just so thrilled to have the Cauthens back with us, Joyce and Jim Cauthen. They bring a real interesting dimension to this festival, not only with their wonderful talent, but with the talk that they will share about the influences of the Celtic music and how also the African American influences came into play at places like this, at plantations here at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains with the farmland around. And so this is really our roots music. And they are folklorists, and you'll have to say what all else because I don't have it all written down this year.
I get tired.
Well, and I want them to tell you a bit about themselves and about how they happen to be here with this knowledge and talent. But it is sponsored by the Alabama Humanities Alliance, and we will ask every one of you, please, at the end of the program to do a little evaluation, because that's part of what we do to have the honor of having them here with us. So don't leave without filling out one of these. I can go ahead and pass it out maybe, and you'll have it at the end.
You got pins?
That way. You know, we've got 2 pins.
Okay.
Yeah, Lori, please go bring some pins. And so just take one and pass it on around so that everyone has one. And Mary, that's you too. Everybody. And then I also have some of our schedules for the next 2 days. So if you have not gotten one of these and you want to know what all is going on, please take one of these. Out in the hall, we have self-guided brochures that you can use to walk around the museum. And the next thing coming up, if I may give a little plug in advance, is on the courtyard. It says noon. It may be a little later than that because of our delayed schedule. But you'll want to join us on the courtyard. And unfortunately, EJ Jones' name got cut off on that. But he is our Piper Jones bagpiper who will be playing tomorrow.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
He's the one that will explain the bagpipe and play some bagpipe music on the courtyard following the conference. So thank y'all. Let's welcome Joyce and
I can get one later.
I'm always so happy to be here. I'm happy when I get here. Now, I don't feel good about a lot of plantation homes, but I do about this one. I love the way that it's more like a meeting place, and it's not like, you can't sit on the chairs, you can't touch the furniture and all that. It's just a really nice homey place. And it acknowledges, at least with a photo, that it had enslaved people, and it knows where they were, and they hope to restore, or at least indicate where those people lived and more about their lives in the future. And I think that's really important that we understand who actually built these houses and what they did for these houses and everything. So I'm really happy to be able to do that. And I represent, instead of talking about Celtic music, I'll talk a little bit about it. I represent the backyard. The front yard is the Celtic music, and the backyard is the music of the enslaved people. And I know there had to have been good musicians here, and this house is like built for dancing, it seems to me. And so I really feel honored to get to do this. And real quickly, the Alabama Humanities Foundation that supported this does that sort of thing. I was in a meeting with them the other day about how we can let people know what we do at the Humanities Alliance. Now, what we do there, and we support people doing programs like this. So if you wanted to do a festival and you wanted to upgrade it in some way with some booklets or a speaker or something like that, they're the people to go to, as long as they're doing something about music or art or psychology genealogy or history or something like that. So we're gonna keep that in mind. And I want to thank Nina for being such a good supporter on this, inviting us to do this. So, well, I'll start. Tomorrow you'll hear a lot about Celtic music. You'll hear a lot of it in front of the yard, in the front yard of Belmont, or the side yard. And that's in honor of the man who built this home, Alexander Williams Mitchell. He was a Virginian who attended college and medical school in Edinburgh, Scotland. And I'm sure he brought back with him a real love for Scotland. But for the next hour, we're going to be honoring the people who played in the quarters behind Belmont for the entertainment of approximately 114 enslaved people here over a period of time. And they played probably for dances right inside here. We don't know it for a fact, but it's well known. We don't know it for a fact that there were black musicians in this location, but it's well known that black fiddlers were considered essential for dances on southern plantations. And the structure of the house speaks for dances and music and parties. The type of southern music we'll be talking about is now called old-time music, and it has definitely both Celtic and African American, even Native American elements that make it what it is. It's just a wonderful hybrid of music. The narrative you often hear is that fiddle music came here from Ireland and Scotland and Wales and the British Isles, and here it got changed to bluegrass, old-time music bluegrass. But really what happened is the fiddle didn't really develop as it is. You know, Stradivari created a fiddle that was really usable and nice and easy to play, and everybody wanted it. And at one time it was not outrageously expensive. And they set up factories in Italy that produced them and made them accessible to people. So even people here, you know, this in here, people, I read the letters or the journals of Thomas Jefferson, and you know, it was a letter, and he was writing to somebody who was going to Italy, and he says, bring me back one of those good fiddles, you know. So people were getting those fiddles. So at the time that fiddles were becoming accessible and becoming really popular for dances, was the time that everybody was playing it, not just in Ireland, Scotland, and in Europe and all that. They were playing it here, and it was white fiddlers and black fiddlers. The first white fiddler that was ever documented was in Jamestown in 1619. Now this wouldn't have been a Stradivarius fiddle because his came later, but in 1619 he had a fiddle. Well, guess what else happened in 1619 in Jamestown? Right, you know, it's the first indentured slaves came. And so right away, blacks were being exposed to this kind of music. So it's not like, oh, we white people learned it and we taught it to them. I think it's just everybody just started learning. Old-time music is something you can hear and pick up by ear. And that's how it's transmitted and everything. It's not, you don't have to be able to read music, you just have to be able to listen and imitate it. And so people have been playing this kind of music for a long time in this country and every place else that the fiddle's gone. Now, one thing that did come from Ireland and Scotland and all is a lot of tunes. So they actually tuned books. So people who could read music could learn from these books, but then other people learned them by ear. And as they learned by ear, they change them, you know, because you can't remember exactly every note, and so you change them. Sometimes you get the name wrong. Sometimes you play one part of it different than somebody else plays that part. And so it comes out a lot of different tunes with different names that may have come from Scotland and Ireland and all, or may have been written here. They're not written, but played here and remembered here. To Ireland we attribute jigs, and to Scotland we attribute reels, and reels are the basis of most fiddle tunes in the South. And but regardless of where they originated, they were played by Scots, Irish, English, Swedish, African Americans, and whoever else had a fiddle. So we're gonna play one, Miss McLeod's Reel. You know that, I bet. And let's see what we'll play. And I played on banjo because they didn't have the fiddles and guitars or they didn't have any instruments. I guess they could have had a piano or some sort of piano. But banjos have been around a long time here, and fiddles, but guitars. Now guitars are old instruments, and they probably had guitars there, but they played a different kind of music on the guitar section. They didn't do chords and follow a fiddle. They played their own melodies and stuff. So anyway,
Probably early 1900s before.
in Alabama, 1920 was kind of the time when people started playing other instruments with fiddles. Like old fiddlers conventions had unaccompanied fiddles all the time. It was like you couldn't have anybody. You had to stand up there and play by yourself. That was the rule. I was also going to talk to you about this. Oh, okay. It's as we said, it was really an Irish tune, but it was about a Scottish woman, and it was just a tune for dancing. And when it got here, people started making up words for it, and it became very Americanized. And the words, it's often called Hop Like Ladies. So I'm going to sing some of Hop Like Ladies. And what that means, I think, is you get a picture of these women that are cooking. They're like baking a cake. And they're dancing, here's the music and they're dancing. And it's Hop Like Ladies, the cake's all dough. Don't pound around the floor or the cake's gonna fall.
1, 2,
African Cherokees playing fiddles. And actually, that they were taken when they were removed. That some of them took fiddles with them to Oklahoma, and they still play on Cherokee reservations in Oklahoma. They play fiddles, and they have fiddle contests. And but that was a surprise to me. And then I realized, it's not because, the traders, the Indian traders who ran that trade for skins and everything, they had, their stores were real community centers, and people came and traded. And if that man who owned it played the fiddle, or he brought in fiddlers, then they would have heard him, and they wouldn't want him to do it. And so the reason we know about this is because there was a man named John Norton, and he grew up in Scotland, but his father was a Cherokee Indian who had married a woman who was not, and she was a white woman, a white Scottish woman, and they lived in Scotland. And so he grew up there, but he wanted to know what it was like, what his father, this John Norton wanted to know what his father had, the life he led as a Cherokee Indian in Alabama. And so he came to the South in 1809, 1810, and he wrote a journal of his observations. And it included an entry about a dance and entertainment in a Cherokee community on the Tennessee River. That's here.
Yeah.
And so this is what he wrote. The father and the family exhorted the young people to prepare. They began with one of their national dances on the green before the door, the leaders singing and dancing it in a circle and followers keeping chorus. Afterwards, an English dance was struck up in the house. They now began to be very fond of these dances, but for want of skillful teachers, none have yet acquired any proficiency in the music. The fiddlers seem only to imitate their own simple notes, which, however, are sufficient to enable them to dance in cadence. Now, I'm so glad he wrote that, but I disagree that the fiddlers may have been not good, because, they might have been playing what they wanted and what people wanted to dance to. If they were cutting out some of the notes, and they were emphasizing the beat, and they were probably just perfectly happy with their music, and I probably would have liked it. We started thinking, after we realized that this could happen, we had noticed that there are tunes that sound like Indian rhythms, American Indian rhythms, Native American rhythms. And so we were thinking of one in particular that we liked, called Grub Springs, and it was recorded, it was just a field recording. It was in the Library of Congress from Charlie Strickland, who was a very well-known old-time fiddler from Lamar County. But he played a tune that he had never recorded commercially, and called Grub Springs. And see if you think this maybe could have been the kind of music that he was hearing, that John Norton was hearing and not liking.
If you ever get a chance, you can go on YouTube and look up Athabascan music, which is Native Americans from Alaska. And it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
It's like Soldier's Joy, simple tune played all real wild.
Yeah, the part, one, two measures was going on for a long time. Well, we would normally be playing two measures and going somewhere else, we'll just stick there.
Well, this tune is that way. It's amazing tune.
Really?
Is it, oh, but it's still on that. Oh, it's all right, okay.
Ready?
blues. He described his epiphany about this kind of music. Music he thought was primitive or a low form of music. Because, you know, he was a trained musician who could read and write musical notation and compose great tunes. Well, he and his band, he wrote a story, and if you haven't read his autobiography, The Father of the Blues, you should read it. It's really good. And I'm going to quote some other things from him. But he said he and his band had been paid to play for a dance in Cleveland, Mississippi. This is around 1900. But when they got there, they were not received well. People just kind of didn't pay attention to them, seemed unimpressed and everything. So his host requested that they take a break and let the local band play. So Andy wrote, and he said, I'm fine with me if they're paying me out. I'll take a rest, you know. So anyway, he said they struck up one of those over and over strains like that. That seemed to have no very clear beginning and certainly no ending at all. The strumming attained a disturbing monotony, but on and on it went. The kind of stuff that has long been associated with cane rows and levee camps. Thump, thump, thump with their feet on the floor. Then on second thought, he decided it wasn't monotonous, but rather entrancing or hypnotic. And he saw how the dancers loved it. And they started throwing money, and they were making money. And then he said, I saw the beauty of primitive music. They had the stuff that people wanted. It touched the spot. Their music wanted polishing, but it contained the essence. And I think that's what a lot of this, we're going to be playing a lot of old archaic tunes like that. And I think they contain the essence of music. So I think that can be applied. That what he said is just what John Norton was thinking, but I'm not saying it so clearly. But I'm not sure how much Native American fiddlers influenced old-time fiddling, given the fact that they weren't here very long. They weren't allowed to stay here, but I'm certain that African American fiddlers influenced it greatly. That's well known. One of the most enlightening writings on antebellum black fiddlers came from a man named N.P. Judge of Mobile. And he sent this letter to H.C. Nixon, who was a graduate student at Auburn in history, who was doing a survey. He was asking if people who had grown up on plantations to tell him about the entertainments of enslaved people on holidays like Christmas and the 4th of July. And when they had some time off, what did they do? And he talked about hunting and fishing and all that, but he said they played a lot of music and dance. And he said that the instruments were the fiddle and banjo. Nearly every evening after supper was eaten, most of the slaves assembled at some central place or several places and indulged in wing and buck dancing, which was participated in by a number of the women. Very often when the master had company, the pick of those dancers, both men and women, were called to the house, at the big house as they called it, and for an hour or more entertained the master's guests. They considered it a great honor to be asked to do this, and were sure of a glass or two of wine or whiskey and cake, etc. Now, I thought, oh, that sounds cool. I bet they like that. But if you ever read 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup, and there was a movie too. He was from New York, and he was a master violinist. And one day he was told to come to a certain place, and that he would be paid to play music. And he got kidnapped and brought down south, and he lived here in horrible conditions for 12 years. And he said that, you know, you're a slave and you've been working all day in the fields, and you don't want them waking you up at 12 o'clock and say, come entertain our guests, you know, because you know you're going to be out there playing the next morning. And also you don't have very nice clothes and everybody's dressed up and everything. And so it really wasn't as good. So, you know, this was Mr. Judge's perception, and I hope it's true that they really enjoyed it and were honored to do it. For the buck and wing dancing and jigs, and this I continue his talk. The tunes most popular were
and I think you will know these. Cotton Eye Joe, Sally Gooden, Turkey in the Straw, Possum Up a Gum Stump, Sherman Black Bread, Hot Black Ladies. Hot Black Ladies, he said this today, Urban Clouds Real. Arkansas Traveler, Hen Cackle, and numbers of others. He said they were playing like their songs were improvised. And I never yet knew a violin player who studied music that was able to play anything on their instruments. They had a peculiar way of tuning their fiddles so that the two of the strings were being played on at the same time, making what musicians would call a chord. And white men, sons of the overseers or neighboring people, learned from them to play, but none could imitate them successfully. I just think that's a beautiful summary of the way that they played. He had a good ear for what they were doing. And so we'll tell you more what they meant about the chord and about, he said they couldn't play on their fiddles. A trained musician wouldn't be able to play on their fiddles. And that could be because they were real primitive handmade fiddles often. But sometimes the people in the plantation house wanted them to have a good fiddle and would get them one. I've also heard that they would send them to New Orleans to learn to play the fiddle, just because they really wanted a fiddler in the house, And, but anyway, so it might have been that they didn't have good instruments, but it also, I think it was mainly because of the tuning. And we'll tell you about that when we do straws, I guess. Okay, so the other thing, he mentioned that they played the banjo, and as we said before, the people didn't play guitars with them back then, or mandolins or anything like that. The only other instrument that was played with it was really a banjo, and that's an African instrument. It came by way of the Caribbean islands and then came to this country. And in Africa, people still play, what's it called, a Cauthen? It's also called a banjar. They still play, and play very much like a clawhammer banjo, the style that I play. So we want to play a tune that might have been played back then, and we're going to listen, right? Okay, normally. And this tune is called Catfish, and we learned it from recordings that Alan Lomax made. The only time he came through Alabama to record fiddlers. He came to record Sacred Heart singing, but somebody taught him that coming through this Lexington, coming to Lexington, and he recorded a few fiddlers, and one of the fiddlers was married to a woman who played banjo very well. She played fancy banjo. But anyway, so this is a song she sang, and Alan Lomax, she said, I don't want to sing it, it's crude. And he said, oh, nobody will. Let me record it, nobody will ever hear it. And of course now people are playing it, so I'm recording it. But it's called Catfish, and I know, you'll hear from the last verse, you'll know that it's really an African American tune.
Thank you.
Richard, what was Shirley's last name?
Hammond.
From where? Gracie? Lexington? All right, we know some Hammonds.
Oh, do you? Well, ask, find if they know about, and find and tell me if they know anything about, I know she's long gone, but I'd like to know more about her.
Yeah.
See a picture of her or something like that. Okay, so now I mentioned that they never played the banjo with the fiddle. The other things they use for rhythm and stuff, the things like padding, you know, we use that,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, which I cannot do. And jawbones, get a jawbone and rub a bit on the teeth, and broom straws, and that's what I'm going to show you next. Is they beat things on the fiddle. Oh, you tell them that the fiddle is the way it was tuned.
Yeah, so, that fiddle that I've been playing is just standard, normal tuning. And then, you know, you talk about playing chords, but every pair of strings in normal tuning makes a chord, it's just different chords. So, that's an A chord, a D chord, and a G chord. So this fiddle is tuned differently, it's all one chord. It's an A chord. So, it rings a lot more if you're staying a particular chord than this fiddle does. So,
It's louder and it's dronier, and that's why they use it. They like that drone sound. But
There's nothing you can play on this that you can't play on this, it just sounds.
Well, they fingers on two strings, and then there's two strings left. And so you can take something like this. This happens to be a bamboo skewer, but we used to use broom sedge, which, you know, you make brooms out of, and that's why they call it broom straws. And but these are more dependable
Yeah.
than
In other parts of the country, they use two straws.
yeah.
But
I
my
was-
great uncle and a fellow here in West Alabama did it this way.
Yeah, so you'll see people do that, you know, and I tell them, well, we're so poor in Alabama, we can all do that. Okay, so here we go. So this is called
Candy Girl.
Candy Girl. Came from Tennessee, Uncle Bud Stevens.
Really?
W.C. Handy's uncle, Whit Walker, was lively and unregenerate at 80, showed Handy how to accompany him with a pair of knitting needles. Standing behind the fiddler, the youth would reach around the fiddler's left shoulder and beat on the strings in the manner of a snare drummer. He also stomped his feet with a fancy rhythm. This was real stomping. Let's see. So, W.C. Handy appeared. That's right. Okay. Now we'll play. These some tunes we're fairly confident were composed and played by fiddlers on plantations. And I hope we can play these in a way that captures their essence. We don't know how they sound, but we'll do our best. So we remember that empty Judge said, white men, sons of the overseers, or neighboring people, learn from them to play, but none can imitate them successfully. And but we'll do some tunes from people who did try, white people who did try to learn the way that they heard it from the black fiddlers. So we're going to now play that one. Okay. And that's like this one. Okay.
So I said one of those was tuned to one chord. It's tuned to a G chord. I think I said that. But
I'm sure
Sign
you
put
noticed
up
that.
the pictures.
He's so cute. Okay. Now this tune, I love the provenance of this tune. We learned it from, if you people from Athens and all know Jim Holland. You know Jim Holland? Jim Holland's grandfather, Paisley Haygood, played fiddle. And he's we learned this from recordings of Paisley Haygood. But Paisley, somebody had who recorded it, had the thought, well, we should find out where this came from. So, where did you learn this tune, Mr. Paisley? And he said, from John Chambers. Now, John Chambers was a really respected, like, 19th century fiddler around Athens. And John Chambers said he learned it from enslaved banjo player. And Mr. Chambers, yeah, when he was in the Civil War, he learned it. He was a soldier, and he learned it from an enslaved banjo player, or perhaps actually a newly freed banjo player. So this is, and it's called
All
Over
right.
It.
Ready? 1, 1960.
Wow.
But it came to us, we have it. I think that's great. Another man that played tunes that he admits and who he learned it from was D. Dix Hollis. And he lived in Sullivan, Alabama. You know where that is?
Yeah.
Far northwest of Mississippi. And he grew up, his family was very wealthy, and he grew up on a plantation that had many enslaved people. And when he was 10 years old, he was born in 1861, and he said when he was 10 years old, he got real interested in, he'd see this fiddler playing, he got real interested in playing, and so that he went up to, I don't know if he asked or if the fiddler just told him, but what he said, he said, Ben Guyton, one of our slaves, noticed my great talent and love for the fiddle and taught me all he could about it when he was 10 years old. So that would have been around 1871. So the reason he wrote this, D. Dix wrote this, was he was a wealthy man. He was a doctor, and he had gone to New York City on a train with E.E. Ford, who's a piano company. He went there and he went in and recorded 12 records. And so then in Alabama, when the first radio station was formed, that would be WAPI in Auburn, they invited people from across towns across the state to send their best musician to the station and be the first people to play on the radio. So of course, they sent D. Dix Hollis from Sullivan, and he could afford to travel all that way, And so there was a newspaper, I found this newspaper clipping in a 1926 paper where he wrote that. He wrote a little biography of himself, which was really rare in those days. Anyway, so we'll play one of the tunes that I hope we haven't got running out of time here. Okay, so Walking in the Parlor is one that he recorded, so he had the foresight to record. Did you chip the tune? Is that okay? Okay. So this one, of the 12 he recorded, we only found about 6 or 8 of them. I helped find some through relatives of his. And this is one, he called it Walking in the Parlor, and then I saw where he played it in the field convention in 1910, and he called it Walking in the Parlor, or they called it. Anyway, but all those things, there were some you could tell did not come from black players. They were very European sounding. But this is one that I think, several of his, I think he learned from Ben Cotton. To raise his own family. So he didn't learn modern fiddling at all. He still played. When we came to visit him, he's 86 and he still played the old style. He would tune his fiddle for every key he was in and everything. And we just thought that was great. And this is one tune that sounded like it was African influence. And it was called Messenger. Oh, yeah, okay. So, that would have sounded bad. Messenger was a racehorse, and so it's named after a racehorse, and it kind of gallops along like a racehorse. The interesting thing to me about it was that he said that, they didn't really have accompanying instruments, so there was no bass or anything. They played for dance, and they didn't have sound amplification. They needed to be as loud as they could. So several people in his family played, his uncles played fiddle. So they would play at least 2 of them and play harmonies and play twin fiddle to make it louder. And he taught us 2 parts to this tune, Messenger, a high and low part. And,
this one sounds like a horse. If you watch the Kentucky Derby where they're lined up in the gates and they're wheeling around their antsy. The gate opens and they start off, and when they hit the stretches, they smooth out. This tune sort of does that. Ready? One.
Now we'll get to my favorite story, the last 10. So I had heard, before I even met Mr. Hudson, I had been in the Thomasville Library, the courthouse, I think, maybe going through old newspapers, and that's before microfilm and newspapers.com and everything, and you had to just look at the paper. It took forever, and sometimes you go travel all that way and not find a thing. Well, I found this lovely piece in an 1898 paper, Thomasville Argus, that talked about the master violinist of the city. Our city's master violinist, Gus Rose, who wielded the bow on this occasion in his masterly way to the tune of $10. Paid $10 to play, which is probably a lot of money for that time. And so he said, another article talked about him and said he played a tune called The Lost Child. Now Jim and I know a real fancy tune called The Lost Child, and I thought, that doesn't sound like a dance tune, really. I wonder if it was the same The Lost Child we know. So I just wondered about it. And so when we met Henry Lee Hudson, I asked him if he had ever heard of a fiddler called Gus Rose. He said, "Oh, black fiddler." I said, "Here's black." He goes, "That's really good. You know, there's not black fiddlers anymore. I mean, they're starting to be again, but they got out of business after the Civil War anyway." But so I was really excited about that, and I said, "Are you sure of that?" He said, "Yeah." And I looked up in the census, and he was black. Anyway, so eventually I realized I could ask him if he knew how to play the Lost Child. He said, "Oh yeah," because he said my daddy played with Gus Rose. They played together, and he had met him, and Gus Rose didn't die until 1935, and Henry Lee Hudson was born in 1906, so he had a long time to know a black fiddler named Gus Rose. And then, because I got excited about it, a man who lived down in Thomasville got excited about it too, and he did some research, and he found people who knew him and could talk about him, and found his will, and I'll tell you real quickly, it's real interesting to me. He was born into slavery, Gus Rose, in 1853. He was said to have a very refined voice and countenance. He was educated. He left a will that details his personal property, which is one violin, one organ, a new home sewing machine, a stove, gardening tools, a Davenport bed, an iron bed, and one washcloth. His wife preceded him in death, so when he died in 1835, he left these positions to Dr. J.S. Davidson, Sr., who he said is my personal physician and benefactor, for whose services and gifts and advances I have never been able to adequately pay during my lifetime. And this is a kind of sad story to me that he never was able to pay him back, and also he was, in the census, he was listed as a musician many times, but at the end, it was like as a gardener or something like that. So he couldn't make a living off of his talents. But anyway, so I was so excited that Mr. Henry Lee Hudson knew The Lost Child. So we're going to play that for you and let you ask questions. Okay. You're not doing this right now.
No, check my shoes. So I had this is the third tune. This is also one chord, but the other one was like G, D, G, D. This is G, D, G, B. So it's a little bit. Thank you.
So that was a lost job. So I'll make a concluding remark if we have time for a question or two. We'll take it, or if we don't have time, you can just come up and talk to me about it. Right? I mean,
Yes,
anybody wants to talk to me. Go ahead and take your time.
Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this back of the house music today and learned enough about black fiddlers that when somebody says to you something about the growing number of blacks who are playing country music these days, you can say, they're actually getting back to the country music they influenced in the early days. We've been playing together 40 something years.
Wonderful. Enjoyed it.
So talented, aren't they?
Yes.
Am I the only one that's never heard that possum tune that you mentioned earlier?
Possum up a gum stuff.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, I don't know if I have either. I usually bring books and albums that we did, but we created an album called Possum Up a Gum Stop.
Okay.
And it was the fiddlers that we learned these from playing.
Okay.
And so the white and string band, who I love, they played a tune, and I said, what's that called? I said, Possum Up a Gum Stop. He said, you ought to name your album Possum Up a Gum Stop. So I said, you sure? That's nice. Sure. So we did, and then we named the album after it. And then,
Years later.
years later, they were, I said, y'all play Possum Up a Gum Stop. And he said, we don't play that. And I said, now, you told me you played it, you recorded it. He says, oh, that's not Possum Up a Gum Stop.
That's Wayne Pro Bill.
Yeah, that's what it was. I know, so we don't even know how fast it is.
You have to track it down. You have to track it down.
Y'all have to track it down.
That's your job.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much.